If you're an empath, your life has probably followed a pattern. People are drawn to you, they offload their pain onto you, and they leave feeling lighter while you collapse under the weight they never intended to carry themselves. They call you intuitive, deep, and a good listener. They romanticize your ability to feel everything, and for a while, maybe you did too. But if you're honest with yourself, brutally, heartbreakingly honest, you know they weren't just admiring you. They were gaining access. And what no one ever says, but you've always felt, is that your empathy has become a doorway, an open one they walked through again and again, not to know you, but to use you. Let's be brutally honest. In today's world, empaths aren't nurtured. You're being used by energy vampires, system manipulators, emotionally immature people who can't hold their own grief and project it onto the most open, most feeling, most absorbent person in the room, you. You've been praised for your softness, your compassion. But behind that praise was expectation. Keep absorbing, keep soothing, keep giving. No one told you that empathy without discernment is not a virtue. It's a liability. Empathy, when untrained, becomes compliance. Empathy, when unguarded, becomes servitude. Empathy, when unguided, becomes emotional warfare. And you're on the losing end. Because predators don't come with fangs anymore. They come with emotional wounds, with stories, with trauma they won't process, but will gladly bleed all over you. And here's the worst part. You've been taught that your exhaustion is noble, that your collapse is love, that your boundaries are selfish, that your discomfort proves your purity. It doesn't. It proves that you've been lied to. You're not here to carry everyone's pain. You're not here to absorb dysfunction. You're not here to mirror people who refuse to face themselves. You're here to become sovereign. And that requires something empaths rarely allow themselves. Strategic clarity, not chaos, not lashing out. Strategic emotional intelligence, the kind that says, I see what you did. I see what I allowed. I see what ends now. This isn't a pep talk. It's a declaration. Empaths are under attack, and you're going to learn how to fight back intelligently. Let's get clear. The empath is not just someone who feels deeply. In psychological terms, an empath is someone with incomplete energetic boundaries, a highly responsive nervous system, and an unconscious belief that other people's emotions are more important than their own. That combination is a dream come true for a predator. You are wired to pick up on emotional signals that others can't even detect. You're attuned to the unsaid, the subtle, the shadow. But unless you've been taught to separate self from other, unless someone has shown you how to distinguish between care and codependence, then all that attunement makes you not powerful, but permeable. You are open, and predators look for openness, not the physical kind, the emotional kind, the psychic kind, the person who listens without interrupting, who flinches at conflict, who soothes even when they're shaking, who tolerates discomfort just to keep the peace. That's not peace, that's submission. They scan for the person who won't push back, the person who can be guilted, the person who feels bad for drawing a line, the person whose trauma has trained them to believe that being chosen by pain is the same as being loved. Emotional manipulators, energy vampires, narcissistic personalities, they all work off one premise. Someone else must carry what I refuse to feel. And empaths, especially trauma-trained empaths, walk around with an invisible sign that says, dump it here. I'll hold it. I'll process it. I'll make it make sense. Why? Because empaths mistake pain for connection. They've been conditioned, often from childhood, to believe that love means absorption, that relationship means endurance, that loyalty means self-sacrifice. And so, when someone begins to test them, pushing boundaries, projecting shame, gaslighting them into confusion, the empath doesn't run, they empathize harder. They see the wound behind the behavior, they humanize the abuse, they validate the story, they explain away the disrespect. Because part of them still believes, if I can just love them enough, they'll stop hurting me. They won't. Because it was never about love. It was about access. They found your open gate and walked through it. And every time you cried but stayed, flinched but forgave, collapsed but kept giving, they confirmed what they suspected from the beginning. You won't fight back. This is the moment everything changes. Because once you realize that your nervous system has been read like a map by people who never intended to respect your depth, only use it, you can no longer afford to stay soft for the sake of politeness. You don't need to stop feeling. You need to start fortifying. You thought it was love, of course you did. They mirrored your depth, echoed your pain, celebrated your sensitivity. They told you they'd never met someone like you, that your empathy was rare, your heart golden. You believed them, not because you're naive, but because your nervous system is tuned to sincerity, and what they offered felt like recognition. But what you didn't realize was that what looked like love was actually strategy, an emotional operation, not a connection. It starts with intensity, fast connection, fast trust, fast fusion. You feel like you've been seen, maybe for the first time, and that's the trap. Because the moment you open your nervous system that wide, before you've tested their capacity to hold it, they begin mapping you. They learn what soothes you, what frightens you, what you'll apologize for, what you'll sacrifice to keep the peace. Then comes the drain. Their story gets heavier. Their mood shifts more often. Their chaos becomes yours to manage. At first, you try harder. Of course you do. That's your programming. The more unstable the connection, the more you stabilize it. You offer grace, patience, understanding. But nothing changes. Because the goal was never healing. The goal was access. But when you begin to see the pattern, when you get quiet, when you speak a boundary, when you stop absorbing, they don't self-reflect. They discard, swiftly, cruelly, often with punishment. You're no longer useful. They withdraw attention, affection, affirmation. And suddenly, the person who once mirrored your soul acts like you're a burden. That's how the betrayal completes itself. Not just in what they did, but in what they left you believing. That you're unworthy, broken, dramatic, too sensitive. When in truth you were never loved, you were fed on. You were emotionally harvested by someone who mistook your compassion for compliance. This is not an isolated experience. It's a replicable blueprint. And it's still working because you haven't been taught that empathic people are often groomed, not with cruelty, but with intimacy. That love can be weaponized. That charm is a tool. You weren't chosen because you were weak. You were chosen because you were open. And that ends here. No more apologizing for saying no. No more rationalizing someone else's disregard. No more tolerating emotional extraction wrapped in romantic language.
If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support.
The battle isn't just happening outside of you, it's happening inside your own body. Every empath who's been emotionally colonized knows this war intimately, the constant internal conflict between what your body knows and what your mind has been taught to accept. Here's the truth. Your nervous system has been trained to betray you in real time. Not because you're weak, but because you've been overridden so many times, you've stopped trusting your instincts. Think about it. Every time your body said no, but your mouth said yes. Every time you felt tension rise in a room, but smiled anyway. Every time you held your breath so someone else could feel comfortable. You trained your nervous system to override its own safety signals in favor of performing peace, but that peace was fake, and the cost wasn't. You learned how to suppress, how to regulate others, how to read micro shifts in mood, tone, posture. like your life depended on it, and in some ways it did. Because for many empaths, emotional fusion was a survival strategy, born in environments where saying no was dangerous, and having needs made you disposable. So what happens when you live like this for years? Your body becomes the battlefield. Your vagus nerve, your internal alarm system, begins to misfire. You're stuck in chronic fight or flight or collapse. Your digestive system weakens. Your decision-making capacity erodes. This isn't drama. This is neurobiology under siege. And here's the real betrayal. You've been told this is your fault, that you're just too sensitive, that you're emotionally dysregulated. But you're not dysregulated, you're overloaded. You're saturated with emotional input that was never metabolized because you never had the space to pause, process, and protect yourself. What most people call empathy is, in your case, neuroceptive chaos. You're scanning constantly for danger, for signals, for threats. You're feeling the mood of the room before you feel your own. And by the time your body sounds the alarm, it's already too late. You're in the middle of another psychic invasion disguised as conversation. This is not how you were meant to live. You weren't designed to constantly abandon yourself to stay emotionally safe. So let's be very clear. Empathy without boundaries is not healing. Empathy without nervous system regulation is not maturity. Empathy without discernment is not compassion. It's self-erasure. You cannot keep loving what is still attacking your body. You can't keep explaining, forgiving, managing, and self-blaming while your gut clenches, your breath shortens, and your system collapses. This is the war. Not just with them. The war is between your conditioning and your awakening, between the survival version of you and the sovereign version of you. You don't need to feel less. You need to fortify more. You need to stop treating your nervous system like the enemy and start rebuilding it like an ally. Let's say it loud. Boundaries are not cruelty, they're clarity. You have been conditioned, spiritually, socially, psychologically, to believe that boundaries are unkind. That saying no means you failed the relationship, that choosing yourself is selfish, that withdrawing your energy is betrayal. But here's the truth. Every time you say yes out of fear, you commit emotional treason against yourself. Boundaries are not barriers, they're borders, sacred sovereign borders of your emotional nation. And without them, you become a colony for other people's chaos, a field for projection, a host for inherited pain. You weren't built to be emotionally accessible to everyone. You weren't designed to be open 24/7 like some spiritual convenience store. Your empathy has limits, and honoring those limits is how you graduate from unconscious absorption into conscious, energetic sovereignty. So why does it feel so wrong to say no? Because your nervous system was trained to associate safety with submission. As long as you were easy to be around, low maintenance, endlessly understanding, you were loved. Or so it seemed. But that wasn't love. That was emotional dependency wrapped in flattery. That was trauma bonding, not connection. That was codependence, not devotion. And every time you reinforce that dynamic, every time you override your truth to make someone else comfortable, you reinforce the lie that you only deserve love when you're disappearing. That ends now. From this point forward, every no you speak becomes an act of compassion for yourself. Every boundary you set becomes a new perimeter in the fortress of your selfhood. Every moment you choose stillness over reaction, sovereignty over shame, regulation over rescuing, you become more aligned with who you were always meant to be. Because your power isn't in your capacity to absorb pain, it's in your capacity to contain your own energy. You are allowed to say no without explanation. You are allowed to withdraw your energy from people who can't hold it responsibly. You are allowed to close the gates to people who only show up to take. You are allowed to refuse to be someone else's emotional regulator. And you are allowed to do all of this without guilt, because you are not here to prove your goodness through suffering. You are here to protect your frequency like your life depends on it, because it does. This is what compassion looks like now. Not overgiving, not over-explaining, not over-functioning. Holding your center, holding your line, holding yourself. There comes a point in every empath's life where a quiet but irreversible shift happens. It's not dramatic. It's not always visible to the people who once fed on your kindness, but internally it's tectonic. You stop asking how to be loved, and you start asking how to be free. This is the moment you stop being the mirror, the sponge, the rescuer, the safe landing place for people who never once asked if you had a soft place to land yourself. This is the moment you become a psychic warrior. But make no mistake, this is not about aggression. This is not about armor, shutting down, or becoming cold. This isn't a costume change, it's an initiation. The empath who rises doesn't build walls. They build filters. They don't stop feeling. They start choosing. They don't abandon love. They reclaim it. Cleaned of obligation, free of performance, returned to its original state. Presence without erasure. The psychic warrior is not less sensitive. They are more sovereign. Their nervous system is no longer a portal for everyone else's projection. It is a temple, protected, sacred, alert. They walk into rooms and no longer absorb. They radiate, they speak and no longer apologize. They articulate, they love but no longer collapse. They hold. Their energy no longer says, "I'll carry it all." It says, "Come correct or don't come at all." They still feel, but they don't fuse. They still care, but they don't contract. They still listen, but they don't leak. And from this stance, this grounded, regulated, clear stance, the world begins to respond differently. People who once preyed on your openness fall away. Not because you attacked them, but because your field no longer carries the scent of self-sacrifice. You no longer vibrate with the signal, "Take what you want. I'll survive." Now your energy says, "I see you, I feel you, but I belong to myself." That is terrifying for manipulators and liberating for you. You become a tuning fork of psychological integrity, and that resonance is contagious. People feel your coherence. They rise or they run, but they no longer confuse you, because now you know what they are, and more importantly, you know what you are. You are no longer a wounded healer. You are a healed disruptor, not bitter, but sharpened, not angry, but exacting, not explosive, but unshakable. This is your final shift from emotional prey to conscious presence, from default receptivity to selective responsibility, from empath by survival to empath by choice. This is what happens when the nervous system heals, the story changes, and the flame, the one that was always yours, finally stops flickering for their approval and starts blazing for your sovereignty. You don't just protect your peace now, you enforce it. There was a time when you didn't know, when you thought that love meant exhaustion, that compassion meant compliance, that maturity meant muting your instincts, that being good meant being consumed. That time is over. You are no longer naive, no longer available for roles you didn't audition for, no longer willing to carry pain that doesn't belong to you, just to avoid disappointing people who never deserved your emotional labor to begin with. You're not here to be the mirror. You're here to be the flame. You're not here to regulate other people's chaos. You're here to protect your clarity. You're not here to absorb everything. You're here to decide what gets in. And if they can't respect your boundaries, your brilliance, your limits, let them go. Not with hate, with precision, with peace, with a level of clarity so profound they'll feel your absence like a psychic silence. You no longer perform availability. You no longer apologize for being whole. You no longer ask for permission to exist without leaking. This is the new you, empath by nature, warrior by necessity, sovereign by design. If this version of you challenges people, that's the point. You're no longer shrinking for their comfort. You're expanding for your truth. Because you're not here to play nice in a world that feeds on your silence. You're here to model what healthy empathy looks like, powerful, boundaried, and utterly unbreakable. This ends with you reclaiming your power, not to harm others, but to heal yourself. Not to build walls, but to build wisdom. Not to shut down, but to rise up as the sovereign empath you were always meant to be.